China has invaded Hong Kong. Hello everyone, this is Mr. Obvious, bringing you the obvious. And today, on news.com.au. Now, I've been actually covering a story about Hong Kong for a while now. I told you all how Pepe is now a symbol of freedom, a symbol of resistance against Chinese tyranny. And there have been many Hong Kong protests trying to fight back against China, trying to be authoritarian and control the region. Well, it looks like China has finally sent in their military to crush the Hong Kongian protests. Here it says, Chinese state media shows tanks and armed personnel carriers rolling through Hong Kong. China has displayed its military might in Hong Kong with a convoy of tanks making a late-night patrol after months of violent protests. Now that's a lie. The protests were all peaceful. The majority of the violence were Chinese plans. I've been watching China in its corruption of the Communist Party, because they are commies, send in sleeper cells and agents who are caught as undercover people there to sabotage the protests. Is straight out of the leftist playbook. Okay, most of it was not legitimate. So that's a lie. That is a complete and utter lie. Now, before we look into this story, monetization on my channel has been completely disabled. I have no ads, I have no revenue. If you want to support me, you can join me on Patreon or Subscribestar, and sharing videos you enjoy or think are important on social media also helps. Now let's look here. Worrying new pictures show Chinese tanks and troops rolling through Hong Kong, where pro-democracy protesters refuse to back down. Now, I wouldn't say they're pro-democracy, I would say they're pro-freedom. Pro-freedom. Democracy is a false meme. Okay, democracy doesn't mean freedom. In fact, pure democracy means tyranny. Tyranny of the masses. What we have, for example, is a constitutional republic. If anything, Hong Kong is fighting for constitutional rights and for freedom, not democracy. Don't let people twist it. That's just left-wing propaganda. We're pro-democracy. Protesters refused to back down. Okay. Chinese state media shared pictures of the heavily armored vehicles and personnel carriers moving in a long convoy at the city's border overnight. It's not clear whether they were coming or going. The pictures also showed a boat loaded with soldiers coming in to dock in the city. So I suspect there may be another massacre, just like what happened in China's past that they cover up constantly. We'll probably never hear about the massacre if there is one. Maybe we'll get some pictures from actual reporters on the ground if there are any, or it's possible China will just massacre and imprison everyone. I wouldn't put it past them. They're a dirty, corrupt nation. Disgusting, really. The government claims it's part of a routine patrol. This is just a routine massacre, friend. Nothing to see here. By the Chinese People's Liberation Army, PLA. I love their names. The Liberation Army. Liberating from what? Freedom? The right to bear arms? The right to free speech? The right to not be a commie? However, Dennis Kwok, member of Hong Kong pro-democracy movement, the Civic Party, said the latest public display is anything but routine. He told local independent media today that the largest PLA troop movements in Hong Kong were deliberate, posturing, and an attempt to warn people. Hey, you better accept our authority. I don't believe that, given the sensitive timing that we have right now, and this is anything but routine, he said. The Hong Kong garrison of Chinese People's Liberation Army conducted the 22nd rotation of its members in the wee hours of Thursday since it began garrisoning Hong Kong in 1997. I believe it's a deliberate posture on part of the PLA to tell or warn the Hong Kong people that they may be deployed. He warned that the use of troops would be the end of Hong Kong and banned the central government not to use military action. Well, they should have lobbied for the right to bear arms before this happened. Locals have been tweeting pictures of the convoy overnight, and commenters from around the world are writing ominous messages. One Twitter user from the US simply wrote, PLA tanks arrive in Hong Kong. The blood is about to flow. Yup, and I really wouldn't put it past the Chinese. They have no sense of morality. China is extremely destructive, both to humanity and the environment. It's a very terrible place. Asian and Western diplomats in Hong Kong watching the movements had been expecting a routine rotation about this time and will be looking closely for any sign of increased numbers or unusual activity. In a statement, the Chinese government wrote that the military display was an annual rotation that had taken place since 1997. I really wonder about that. Approved by the Central Military Commission, the move is normal, routine, annual rotation in line with the law of the People's Republic of China on garrisoning the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, which stipulates that the Hong Kong garrison shall practice a system of rotation of its members, it states. I don't believe you. I do not believe you. In plain English, this means that some of the troops in Hong Kong have finished their post, and the late-night procession saw them replaced with fresh blood. However, military expert from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Malcolm Davis, told news.com.au, we shouldn't take the Chinese government statement at face value. No shit, homie. Yeah, that's quite obvious. I would not trust anything China says ever. They're probably the last people I would trust. This, what happened overnight, serves two purposes, he said. One is that it's a handover of personnel, but the second is that it's a clear act of intimidation. What they are saying is this: we can do this and we can move quickly. However, Australian National University China expert Dr. Graham Smith told news.com.au for once the Chinese government is telling the truth. Oh, a Chinese agent. I didn't know they made them in Australian. The handover last night was totally expected, and it's not taken anyone who follows this stuff closely by surprise at all, he said. Well, maybe if you're a dumbass. Have you read Sun Tzu's Art of War? The Chinese practice dirty fighting. In other words, strategy. China's never about brute force. It's always about clever strategies and lies and manipulation and being sneaky. That's how they do it. They're an underdog. That's how they have to play the game. And this was probably just a convenient excuse to intimidate Hong Kong. He added that the timing seems interesting because of the flare-up in Hong Kong in recent weeks. But in fact, the handover takes place around this time of year every year. That doesn't mean shit, dude. Like I said, strategy. Last night's parade comes just days after Hong Kong police drew their guns on protesters who attacked officers with sticks and rods. Most likely, this was police plants from China who went to attack the police, who retaliated, and that's how you do it. That's how you commit a massacre. Officers also brought out water cannon trucks for the first time on Sunday in a worrying new escalation in the summer-long protests that have shaken the city's government and residents. The day's main showdown took place on Major Road outside of Swun Hua District after a protest march that ended in a nearby park. So the protests are only getting worse. The Chinese government is getting closer with threats. There's plants that have been caught. Things are getting pretty dangerous. Now, I gotta say, I completely side with the Hong Kong protesters. They are the good guys here. That is why Pepe is a symbol of freedom. That is why they were fighting with memes. That is why they were begging people in the West to take up their cause or at least speak out goodly for Hong Kong. So police have thrown tear gas. Protesters apparently have thrown gasoline bombs and bricks. But of course, how do you know it's not a plant? By the Chinese government. They do that stuff all the time. So tensions are rising. That is the one thing that's for sure. And most likely this is not going to end well for Hong Kong unless China actually backs down and gives them what they want, which is not to install some authoritarian extradite law so that anyone accused of a crime in Hong Kong can be dragged to China and ultimately convicted because they will have no rights in China. See, that's what this is about. China wants to be able to pluck anybody from Hong Kong into China and destroy them at a moment's whim because they're authoritarians. Just like the social credit system, they want to control everyone. It's disgusting. China's a disgusting place. They're horrible people. It's a horrible nation. Horrible. I feel sorry for all Chinese citizens and for everyone living in Hong Kong who has to deal with this. Okay, so here we have a snippet. Officers pulled their guns after protesters chased them down the street with sticks and rods, calling them gangsters. And most likely these police are being lied to about the protesters by the Chinese government. Public broadcaster RTHK said one of its reporters saw a uniformed officer fire a shot into the sky. Some protesters said they were resorting to violence because the government had not responded to their peaceful demonstrations. The escalation you're seeing now is just a product of our government's indifference toward the people of Hong Kong, said Rory Wong, who was at the clash after the march. One neighborhood resident, Dong Wang, complained about the tear gas. I live on the 15th floor, and I can't even smell it at home, he said. I have 4 dogs. Sneezing all day. The protesters didn't do anything. They just blocked the road and to protect themselves. So, here we have two tales here. One person claims there was violence, could be a plant. One person saying that the protesters weren't violent at all and it was all peaceful. They're just trying to protect themselves. And the police are using so much tear gas that even on the 15th floor, the dogs are sneezing. If I have to side with China's word and Hong Kong's word, I side with Hong Kong. Protesters have taken to the semi-autonomous Chinese territory streets for more than 2 months. Their demands include democratic elections and an investigation into the police use of force to quell the protests. Both perfectly reasonable. They want a republic. That's what a democratic election is for. It's not true democracy, like I said. They want a republic where we vote representatives into office. They don't want to live in a police state. I don't think anyone does who wants to live in a free society. A large group clashed with police on Saturday after a march in the Kowloon Bay neighborhood, building barricades and setting fires in the streets. Police said they arrested 29 people for various offenses, including unlawful assembly, possession of offensive weapons, and assaulting police officers. Most of those are probably bogus charges. The clashes, while not as prolonged or violent as some of the early ones, ended a brief lull in the violence. The protests, which began in early June, had turned largely peaceful the previous weekend after weeks of escalating violence. So I'm just going to read a few comments. David and 067 says, China and the authoritarian rule have ruined Hong Kong for all time. Wherever the communists tread, destruction and loss of freedom follow. Phil says, China is such a weak nation. Any nation that had to use military force to control a population is inherently weak. So James says something I completely agree with. America should have taken over the world after WW2. God knows we would have had half a century of world peace and democracy. America should have conquered every nation we beat in war. That includes so many countries. We would be bigger, we would be prosperous, and the world would be more free. It was America's greatest mistake to abandon manifest destiny. America is the best shot the world has at freedom. Even though America is corrupt, even though there's problems, the only other option is China. Hell, I would take Russia over China. We have two futures on the line. One future, we have a little bit of freedom, at least, and the possibility for change to become more free. That's America. The other possibility is we have no possibility for freedom, and no change. That's China. China will be the death of humanity. America is at least hope. That is why I choose America. That is why I condemn China. So Mystified says something sad, but probably true. The people of Hong Kong have to recognize that Hong Kong is Chinese territory. Although an agreement is in place to protect Hong Kong's Western-style freedoms, eventually it will be integrated into Greater China. The protests seem to really be more about not wanting the inevitable. I feel sad for them that their way of life will change so dramatically. But who would have thought since the handover that China would become so authoritarian and aggressive? Oh, just about everyone with half a brain. If I was one of those protesters, I would be thinking about immigrating to a country where freedoms that I was used to are being practiced. Guys, find a way to get to Australia, the UK, the USA. The Hong Kong, will be gone in 30 years. Honestly, I agree. It'd be funny, too, if, every person in Hong Kong left. That would be the best way to stick it to the Chinese government. Honestly, everyone just go. Hong Kong's going to fall. But you know what, my friends, that's pretty much the story. The military has finally come to Hong Kong, and this is definitely a warning, in my opinion. The Hong Kongians are in the right. They're holding up Pepe as a symbol of freedom, and the Chinese government is probably going to do something bad. But that's merely the obvious. Well, that's all for now, folks. What do you think about this story? What do you think about what's happening in Hong Kong? And what do you think about China? Do you think they're going to do anything? Do you think they're going to do something terrible? Be sure to let me know. Now, this is just a reminder, but you can join me on Patreon or Subscribestar for as low as $1. Doing so will give you access to Fight Club, a private Discord server. There are different tiers. You can choose whatever you wish. There are also PayPal and Bitcoin options. You can also check out my affiliate link, magnetic MacBook Pro covers. There's a NyanCat version. They're really cute. They stick right onto your MacBook. And they're meant for covering your cameras, and they're more aesthetic than just plain duct tape. You can also help by sharing the video because websites are de-ranking our content. It's one of the ways we can fight back. As always, thanks for watching. This has been Mr. Obvious, and I'll see you all next time.